Just wanna like go out, tag them. Dude, that's the weirdest thing. Control how the coral look. And usually that is a killer for LPS. Alright, Reefers, so in the last video you saw that I was having issue with the Acan Coral because I was trying to ramp up the radiant lights to 39% intensity of my setting, and even that was a little bit too strong. That translates to roughly like 100 plus par. One of the ideas that you guys have is actually to disconnect this particular radiant from the other two. So I did exactly what you guys suggested. I disconnected this radiant from the other two, and then I run the same spectrum except for at a different intensity. Right now it's running at 25% intensity, which translates to roughly 80-ish par, and look at this, it is noticeably a lot happier, and the Euphyllias and other corals down there does not seem to mind at all. So this portion of the tank will remain my low light coral. That includes the Euphyllias in the back. In terms of coloration with Euphyllias, when you hit them with like lower light, it doesn't really translate to a more duller color. Of course, with higher intensity light, your color gets a little bit more intense, but honestly with Euphyllias like Hammer, Frogspawn and stuff like that, the color change is not as drastic as you would with say SPS. So I'm totally happy with it. Coral seems a lot happier. Like there's a lot of green happening right here, green and red. We need some color to get things mixed up a little bit so that it looks a little bit more interesting. And I have just the perfect coral for this job in my mangrove tank right now. Alright guys, here is the mangrove tank. The coral I'm talking about is this guy right here. This is a really nice crown leather coral that I got from Joseph. I actually have two frags from him. One of this guy right here, the other one is kind of like in the back, not in the most optimal position. Although the coral is really happy here, I do want to move this guy because if you look right here, the Space Invader Pectinia has really settled in the tank and even started sending out sweepers to kind of claim more space for itself. And that's what coral do when they sense other corals nearby. They just want to like go out, tag them, and then take over the spot. And the name Space Invader Pectinia fit this behavior perfectly. Oh, one interesting thing. Look at this guy. You see the ammo crab right there? If you follow me on Instagram, you may have seen this already, but this ammo crab actually got some Xenia growing off of his hairy legs. It's kind of hard to see. Actually, you know what? Just for you guys, I'm gonna bug this little dude just a little bit. Look at that. You see that? He got Xenia growing off of his legs. Sorry, buddy. Yeah, talking to Sean, the coral ID and fish ID expert, he mentioned that sometimes ammo crab do that as well. They will like attach some corals or whatnot to their body as camouflage. What will be interesting to see is after this ammo crab molts, is it going to pick up the Xenia again on his legs as camouflage? This is really interesting to me because I always thought only decorator crab would do something like this, but apparently ammo crab do this as well. Huh. Everybody got a sense of fashion, huh? Alright, well here's a better look at the Xenia ammo crab. Did she really just stood still until Xenia started growing onto her legs and then move? I'm about to call this guy Xena the Warrior Princess. Do you guys still remember that TV show? Or am I just really old? Back in the days when I have a 15-gallon extra high tank that I was going to use as a seahorse tank, I had a centerpiece of corals, like a big chunk, and it just got this really nice long white polyp tentacles that just kind of waves in the flow, and is absolutely gorgeous. So between these two, I think I'll probably remove that one right there because this one seems to have found a really nice spot, add some nice movement to this portion of the tank, versus that one is kind of like jam in the back and about to get stung by the Space Invader. So let's move this guy, and I'm thinking about maybe moving one of the Kryptonite Candy Cane into the big tank as well. Maybe this one, I don't know. This one's getting banged up by the macro just smacking it based because of the flow. Yep. All right, I guess we'll talk about this tank in a little bit as well, but for now, let's go ahead, move that coral to the 135. Yes. All right, actually I need a bigger one. All right, the bigger one works, and some of you guys did reach out to me asking me about this grabber right here, and I'll have a link in the video description below for all those who are interested. In terms of where to play this coral, I think I really want to break up all these green right here. I think somewhere around here to break up all the green and red would be nice. I think what I'm gonna do is actually move the Phehedendra because I don't think it's all that happy over here anyways. It's not open as much as I thought it would. Maybe I'll put him more here. It was here a long time ago. I was pretty happy. Let me put him here, away from the light and kind of in a circulating flow. See one little bit of Xenia right there. That could be a problem down the road, but we'll see. I think right there is good. It's gonna grow. and it's gonna fill in this spot right here. Hopefully that'll help break things up a little bit. Still need something here, but it's kind of tricky because shaded area, so we'll see. Yeah, I need to reorganize this side of the tank a little bit better because we got things just kind of dangling out. Usually that makes the tank looks a little bit more messy and not as congruent, but I'm gonna give that letter a day or two to settle in first, and then we'll reorganize and move things around a little. All right, not often we get to see the tank from top down, but it's a cool view. I really need to get one of those acrylic coral viewer that kind of like sinks into below the water surface, and I can put the camera in there or the phone in there so we can get some nice footage without all the water flow up top. And of course I can just maybe like put the tank into feed mode and do it that way, but I feel like just with like that coral viewer where I can put the phone in and stuff like that, I'll still get the nice coral motion. Since most of my corals right now, LPS and softies, got some nice motion going on. I would love to capture those on camera. So I may look into some kind of more affordable alternative for those coral viewer. I know they're being sold for like what, like 25, 30 bucks, which is not terrible, but I'll probably check on Amazon to see if there's like acrylic container that I can buy for like 10 bucks. They can just behave in a similar fashion. We'll see, and I'll keep you guys posted as always. But yeah, I feel like top-down view is one of those views that we don't get to see as much as a reefer. I know public aquarium, especially for large tanks, they have like some top-down viewing options. It would be great if you can have some kind of options like this. I know for the Planet World, one thing that I've seen is they actually have a mirror that's angled 45 degrees downwards from ADA that shows a top-down view. I'm not sure how popular those are because I don't see them that often, and to be honest, it looks kind of goofy. It detract from looking straight up towards a tank. So maybe that's why it's not as popular. But if we have that option, that may be kind of cool. Although it'll run into the same issue of like water turbulence at the top of the tank, so you won't get like a really clear picture. And of course with salt water you also get like salt creep and splash and stuff like that, so maybe it's not as applicable to saltwater tank versus like freshwater Planet tank, because a lot of Planet tank there's hardly any flow, so there's a difference there too.
The next morning,
if you've been following this channel, you know the Frogspawn is one of my favorite corals. So when the 145-gallon reef tank was having issue with Euphyllias, I was absolutely gutted. What I want to share with you today here is from my personal experience and also from information that I've gathered from talking to more experienced reefers. As always, use whatever I say here as one single data point. You want to learn as much as you can, do your own research, and then bring it all together, internalize it, and apply it to your own situation, because again, every reef tank is different. So in my particular case, I'm going to share with you what was causing issue with my Euphyllias and how I solved it. Before we move forward, I know that a lot of corals like Frogspawn and Hammer has been reclassified, so they technically does not fall under Euphyllias anymore. They are blah, 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 blah. But because I'm one of those like stubborn reefers that still call Acan Lord instead of Micromussas, I'm just going to call them all Euphyllias for now. Sean, I know right now when you're looking at this, you're fidgeting in your seat right now. I apologize. I'm not going to touch on what Euphyllia is because I assume you already know that. The problem you're having right now is either your Frogspawn Hammer Torch Coral is not open, or is peeling off, or just generally not happy. So I have had a couple issues with Euphyllia in this tank. If I boil it down, number one, I have fish nipping on certain ones, and number two, the flow was way too strong in this tank for Euphyllias. For those of you who are just joining the channel right now, a couple months ago, I have a 2-bar rabbitfish that I introduced to the tank in order to take care of some bubble algae issue. The problem was that he did not really taking a liking to the bubble algae, but instead I saw him actually picking at the Frogspawn. So one of the more obvious things to check right off the bat is to make sure no fish is picking at the corals. It could be foxfade, it could be a blenny. I've even heard sometimes the hippo tang may pick at corals, so that was a little bit surprising. But first thing first, make sure none of the fish is already picking at your LPS. And along the same line, if you have shrimps, for example like peppermint shrimp, you also want to make sure they're not really bothering your Euphyllias when you're not looking. So this may take a little detective work and a little patience, kind of scouting it out and just dropping in on your tank when they least expect it. Luckily, I have not really ran into any serious issue with like flatworm and stuff. But since I have not really been through it myself, I really don't want to talk too much about it. If you're interested, take a look online and I'm sure you'll find find a lot of information on what to look for and how to treat them. Okay, with fish and pests out of the way, let's get down to the nitty-gritty. So what exactly was happening to my Euphyllias? So for this tank, the issue was flow. I have an MP40 right here. I used to have an MP40 right here running anti-sink. And I noticed, okay, the flow looks a little bit rough, and I feel like some of the Euphyllias really struggling a little bit. I even see some tissue sort of ripping. Initially, I thought it's like fish picking at it, just like what the rabbitfish did, so I was scratching my head. But when I look a little bit more carefully, you see that the tissue seems to be lifting off and peeling a little bit from the way flow is coming. And it gets a little bit obvious if you just kind of sit there and just watch how your coral interact with the flow. You see that tissue's peeling off. So I ended up moving the power head from the side to the back and dialed all the way down to 1%. But even at 1% with MP40 pointing forward, it was a little bit rough with this guy. What I ended up doing is completely just took out the MP40. So right now in this tank, I just have one MP40 on that side pushing. Later on, I may add a MP10 in the back where I can dial it back down further. So we'll see how that goes. But flow was the biggest issue in this tank. One thing I did notice is that when the flow is a little bit stronger, the Euphyllias tend to contract a little bit. For example, if you look at this Frogspawn right now, it's really poofy, right? But when the flow is a little bit higher, even when it's not damaging the coral, that coral just contract a little bit more. It's more compact as a whole. And same thing in the back. When the flow is a little bit higher, you see all the colony kind of like shrink up a little bit. Tissue is not expanded because if it's too big, it'll catch a current and it have the danger of ripping, which makes perfect sense. Same deal right here. When the flow is low, it expands a little bit more. As long as the coral is not being damaged, you can kind of play with the flow as well as the light as well to control how the coral look. One thing I did notice is that when the coral is more puffed up like this, especially for certain corals like the Frogspawn, the color is not as intense because it becomes almost like semi-transparent. Versus if the flow is a little bit higher or the light is a little bit higher, it doesn't expand as much, so the color is slightly more intense. But it's a different look. It's a different look. I feel like with less flow, the whole coral just look a little bit larger and poofier. Versus with higher flow, to the point that it's not hurting the coral, the whole thing just looks a little bit more compact. So ultimately for the Euphyllias in this tank, flow was a major issue. I was also looking into the light, but I feel like for light, they are a little bit more forgiving as long as I slowly acclimate them to higher light. Because in my old tank, the 45-gallon tank, I have a really nice Frogspawn colony that sits right under the Radeon G4 Pro, and I think I was pushing like 130, 140 par at that point. Right now, I'm sitting at about 80 par at this point and about 150 at the top of the rock work. But I do find that Euphyllias, they seem to be pretty forgiving as long as you give them a chance to acclimate to the higher light. And just like I mentioned before, under higher light, the coral seems to exhibit slightly brighter color, but again, the change is not as drastic as, say, like SPS under a bright light versus in the dark. For Torch, it definitely seems to prefer much higher flow than the Frogspawn and Hammer. They are totally a different beast. And while we are on the subject, Torch corals will sting Hammer and Frogspawn, so you want to make sure they're not touching. In fact, from what I learned from Tidal Garden's video that Fang made, Hammer corals, while they do not quote-unquote sting each other, they actually try to sting each other. So it is actually not ideal to park them up right next to each other, but if they have to be next to each other, they'll keep trying to sting each other, except probably no damage unless the coral's already stressed out. All right, back to the Torch. I don't want to go too deep in Torch simply because I don't have a lot of personal experience. This one seems to be doing well so far. I'm crossing my fingers, but for Torch care, look up the information on Reef to Reef on YouTube. There's a lot of great information out there from people who are more experienced at keeping these kind of corals than me. I'll stick to my Frogspawn and the Hammer. All right, one last thing I want to leave you guys with in terms of keeping Euphyllias happy is actually magnesium. I was told that Euphyllias actually enjoys a healthy magnesium level. Currently in my tank, I think my magnesium is around 1450, if not it's slightly higher. It's definitely a little bit elevated. And as you can see, the Euphyllia is perfectly happy here. While I cannot individually test that claim, but I've seen that raising my magnesium did not hurt anything, and the Euphyllias do seems a lot happier. I cannot simply attribute that to the elevated magnesium because I've been dosing trace elements as well. But what I can say is that raising the magnesium in this tank definitely did not hurt the Euphyllias. If you are having issue with your Euphyllias, that's a quick checklist. Number one, make sure there's no pests. Number two, make sure flow is not too strong. Number three, make sure you're not light shocking your corals. And finally, number four, check your magnesium level. Maybe there's something to it. But of course, this is with the understanding that your tank's basic parameters should all be within spec. And also, there's no crazy swing because, again, alkalinity swing is going to destroy your corals, Euphyllias included. This could be a quick checklist to make sure that you did not miss something along the way. By the way, you notice that I did not talk much about brown jelly disease, and usually that is a killer for LPS. And whenever I notice it, typically I just kind of break off that branch, cut off that piece of flash, and just toss it away ASAP, because those things are bad news, infectious, and it's gonna take down the entire colony in no time. Recently, there has been new development in terms of battling brown jelly disease. Nothing is really conclusive yet, so I'm kind of hesitant in terms of presenting those information here as well. But if you're interested in a little reading material, or you just have nothing left to lose but to try, take a look on Reef to Reef, do a search on brown jelly disease, and there are a couple methods that people recommend, and some of them are actually seeing nice, consistent results. But again, I have not tried any of these solutions personally, so I'm kind of hesitant presenting those information here. If you have tried it, you have success battling brown jelly disease, sure, leave a comment, let me know. I'm interested in learning more about those as well. If you're having a Euphyllia issue right now, I hope this helped, and I wish you the best of luck. Thank you as always for tuning in every Sunday at 12:30 p.m. sharp. I'll see you in the next one. Look at the pair of Bankai cardon. Oh, look at this guy. Here's a good view of the Xenia Crab. Look at this guy.